What if everything you've ever wanted, success, clarity, confidence, fulfillment, wasn't somewhere out there in the future, but already inside you, waiting to be unlocked? Most people go through life thinking they need to change their job, their partner, their bank account, or their body to finally feel happy or confident. But what if the only thing you really needed to change was the way you think? There was a time I felt like I was running in circles. Every day felt the same. I'd wake up, go through the motions, and lie in bed at night with 100 thoughts racing through my mind, all of them laced with doubt, regret, or fear. I wanted to feel driven. I wanted to feel like I was building something meaningful. But no matter what I tried, new habits, new routines, even changing environments, nothing really stuck. It always came crashing back to the same feelings. I'm not good enough. I'm falling behind. Something's missing. Then something clicked. I began to question not what I was doing, but how I was thinking. What if the problem wasn't the world around me, but the lens through which I saw it? What if I could take control of the stories playing in my head and write new ones that gave me power instead of stealing it? That simple shift, realizing that mindset isn't just part of the journey, but the foundation of everything, changed the game for me. I didn't need to wait for motivation or success to find me. I just needed to master the one thing I actually had control over, my mind. And once I did that, nothing outside of me had the power to stop me anymore. That's when everything began to change. For most of my life, I believed that real change was slow. I thought it required years of effort, discipline, and maybe even a stroke of luck. I'd look at people who seemed to be thriving, those who radiated confidence, who woke up excited, who moved through life with clarity and purpose, and I'd wonder what they had that I didn't. I tried the usual things, setting goals, writing to-do lists, downloading productivity apps. Sometimes I'd feel a spark, but it never lasted. Within a few days or weeks, I'd slide back into the same patterns, feeling frustrated and ashamed that I couldn't seem to stick with anything. I started to believe that maybe I just wasn't wired for success or consistency. Maybe that kind of life just wasn't meant for me. What made it worse was that I couldn't explain what was wrong. From the outside, my life looked fine. I had responsibilities, a job, a routine. I wasn't failing exactly, but I definitely wasn't thriving. Deep down, I knew I was capable of more. I felt like there was a better version of me trapped inside trying to get out, but no matter what I tried, I couldn't seem to access it. I kept waiting for the right time, the right circumstances, the right motivation. But the longer I waited, the more disconnected I became from that vision of who I wanted to be. Then something shifted. I stumbled upon a concept I had always overlooked. The idea that our thoughts create our reality, not the other way around. It sounded simple, even cliche, but the more I sat with it, the more I realized how powerful it was. I had spent years trying to change my life without ever changing the way I thought about myself and the world. Once I began focusing on the inner game, my beliefs, my language, my emotional state, everything began to shift. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because I became stronger, more intentional, more aligned. Over the next 30 days, I decided to challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. I didn't wait for permission, for things to calm down, or for a perfect plan. I just started showing up differently, thinking differently, speaking differently, responding differently. And those small internal shifts led to massive external results. In 1 month, I didn't become a completely different person, but I uncovered the version of me that had always been there, just waiting for the right mindset to bring it to life. The biggest obstacle I faced wasn't lack of time, money, or opportunity. It was my own mind. I didn't realize it at first. I thought I was just being realistic or cautious, but looking back, I see how much I was sabotaging myself without even knowing it. Every time I had an idea or a goal, I could feel the excitement until the voice in my head kicked in. That voice said things like, "Who are you to do this? You failed before, remember," or "What if you mess this up and look stupid?" It wasn't loud or aggressive, but it was constant, quiet doubt dressed up as logic. And I listened to it over and over again. Because of that, I avoided taking risks. I said no to opportunities I secretly wanted. I talked myself out of speaking up, starting projects, and even dreaming bigger. I thought I was protecting myself from failure, but all I was doing was settling for less. The worst part was how normal it felt. I thought everyone lived this way, stuck between wanting more and fearing they weren't enough. Eventually, that mental tug of war became exhausting. I'd get inspired one day, make a plan, maybe even take a few steps, but then self-doubt would creep back in. One small setback and I'd spiral. See, I knew this wouldn't work. It's become a cycle. Start, stop, retreat, try, fail, withdraw. And with every repetition, my confidence took another hit. I didn't just doubt my actions. I began to doubt. I told myself, maybe I'm just not the type of person who finishes things, or maybe I'm just average. And that's okay. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I knew I had more to give. I just didn't know how to access it. I'd read books, watched motivational talks, even tried journaling, but nothing seemed to stick. I wanted to believe that change was possible, but I didn't know where to start. And I was tired of talking myself out of things, tired of holding back, tired of feeling like I was waiting for some external miracle to push me forward. The real challenge wasn't the world outside of me. It was the war happening in my own head. I didn't need new goals. I needed a new mindset. Until that changed, nothing else would. Once I realized the root of my struggle was internal, everything started to look different. I stopped obsessing over external results and started paying attention to the conversations I was having with myself every single day. I began to notice how often I spoke in limits, phrases like, I can't, I always mess this up, or it's too late for me. These weren't just passing thoughts, they were deeply ingrained patterns that shaped how I showed up in every area of my life. So I made a decision. I would focus for 30 days on changing the way I thought before trying to change anything else. At first, it felt awkward and unnatural. I started by simply observing my thoughts, writing them down, and asking myself, is this helping me or hurting me? I realized I'd been treating my thoughts as facts rather than choices. That alone was a breakthrough. Every time I caught myself spiraling into self-doubt or hesitation, I would pause and challenge it. Instead of thinking, I'll probably fail, I'd ask, what if I succeed? Or what's another way to look at this? I also began setting intentions every morning, not just tasks. I told myself who I wanted to be that day, focused, calm, courageous, and I repeated those traits out loud. It felt silly at first, but I noticed how much it shifted my energy. I felt more in control, more grounded. I started journaling with purpose, not just venting, but reflecting on what I learned, what I wanted, and what I was grateful for. But one of the most important parts was changing how I responded to setbacks. In the past, a mistake would lead me into a spiral of frustration and quitting. But now I saw it differently. I began to treat failure as feedback. If something didn't work, I didn't beat myself up. I asked better questions. What can I learn from this, and how can I grow stronger from this experience? That shift from judgment to curiosity was powerful. I also became more aware of the environments and people I surrounded myself with. I limited time with those who drained me or fueled negativity and leaned into voices and messages that encouraged growth and possibility. Bit by bit, I felt my perspective changing. I was no longer waiting for clarity or motivation. I was creating it. The more I aligned my thinking with who I wanted to become, the more my action starts to reflect that version of myself. Around the third week of my mindset journey, something happened that stopped me in my tracks. I had been making small internal shifts, changing how I spoke to myself, setting daily intentions, reframing failure, but I hadn't yet tested these changes against something that really scared me. Then the moment arrived. An opportunity I'd been avoiding for years presented itself again, and it was something I'd always wanted to pursue, but had buried under layers of excuses, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough, fear of being seen trying and failing. This time, though, something felt different. The fear was still there, but it didn't feel paralyzing. Instead of immediately shrinking back, I paused and asked myself, what would the future version of me do in this moment? That simple question flipped a switch. I realized that the person I had been trying to become wouldn't hide. They wouldn't talk themselves out of a dream. They'd take the chance, not because they were fearless, but because they believed in growth over comfort. With my heart racing, I said yes to the opportunity. It wasn't a perfect performance. I stumbled. I second-guessed myself midway through, but I finished. I followed through, and the world didn't collapse. In fact, quite the opposite happened. After I took action, something inside me shifted. I had just proven to myself that I was capable of doing the thing I had been most afraid of. That single decision became a turning point. I realized I had been giving fear way too much power, letting it dictate my choices and identity. By walking through it, even imperfectly, I took that power back. I saw firsthand how action, not perfection, builds confidence. I stopped needing validation or guarantees and started trusting myself more. From that moment on, I knew I could never go back to who I was before. That one choice, taking a step towards something that once terrified me, became the proof I needed that everything I had been practicing was real. I didn't need to wait to feel ready. I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to take the next brave step. That single moment didn't change everything overnight, but it changed me, and that made all the difference. Looking back, the shift didn't happen because I found some magic formula or because life suddenly became easier. It happened because I finally understood that my mindset was the key to everything. For years, I had been looking outside of myself for answers, new routines, external motivation, better timing, when the truth was the real transformation started the moment I decided to look inward. Once I became aware of the beliefs, thoughts, and emotions that were running the show, I was able to take responsibility and make conscious changes. It wasn't about becoming a completely different person overnight. It was about making intentional choices every day, replacing self-doubt with belief, trading excuses for action, and choosing progress over perfection. That commitment, even on the days when I didn't feel like it, created momentum, and that momentum became confidence. Suddenly, I wasn't questioning myself every step of the way. I was taking action and adjusting as I went, trusting that I had the ability to figure things out. What changed wasn't the world around me, it was how I responded to it. Stressful situations didn't disappear, but my ability to handle them improved. Challenges didn't stop coming, but I saw them as opportunities to grow rather than reasons to quit. I stopped waiting for the right time and started making this time the right one. I became more intentional in my relationships, more present in my work, and more compassionate with myself. The most powerful lesson I've learned is that mindset isn't something you fix once and never touch again. It's a daily practice, a lifelong commitment to awareness and growth. But once you see the impact it can have, not just on your success, but on your peace, confidence, and clarity, you'll never want to go back to living unconsciously. If someone had told me 30 days ago how much could shift in such a short time, I wouldn't have believed them, but now I've experienced it. I know what it feels like to reclaim your sense of power and direction, and that's something no one can take from you. Real change doesn't come from waiting, it comes from deciding. And once you do, you'll never look at yourself or your potential the same way again. Now it's your turn. If you've been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or like you're capable of more but just can't seem to break through, this is your moment. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need to decide that enough is enough. That you're done waiting for circumstances to change and ready to take ownership of the one thing that has the power to shift everything: your mindset. Start small, Commit to 30 days of showing up for yourself in a different way. That could mean journaling every morning for 10 minutes, paying attention to your self-talk, or asking better questions when things get tough. Begin noticing the thoughts that limit you, write them down, challenge them, replace them with something that empowers you, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Create space each day, even just a few minutes, to reflect on who you want to become and how that version of you would think, speak, and act. Set an intention every morning, speak it out loud. Remind yourself that change doesn't come from doing more, it comes from thinking differently. And from that place, better actions will follow. Stop waiting for motivation to magically appear. It comes from movement, not stillness. Take that first step, no matter how small. Open the journal. Say yes to the opportunity you've been avoiding. Make the call. Speak the truth. Choose courage, even when it feels like fear is louder. That's where confidence is born, in the doing. Don't underestimate what can happen in just 30 days of committed, conscious effort. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to prove to yourself that you're capable of showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. This isn't about achieving perfection. It's about reclaiming your power, rewiring your perspective, and deciding that your future will no longer be dictated by your past. The moment you choose to think differently is the moment everything begins to change. So take that step. Start now. Your breakthrough doesn't need to wait. It starts with one decision, and that decision is yours to make today.